Let's talk about what's happening here at Cannes Lions, because there's been quite there's been quite a big change taking place. The industry has been disrupted. There's been a structural change that's impacted many of the big ad agencies, including WPP that you founded and that you took on a long journey. Do you think the advertising agencies have found a way back in 2019?
No, it's too early to tell. I mean, if you take, for example, the case of WPP, they took a £300 million provision. So at least you're protected for the following year. But there's a dichotomy between what you see at Omnicom and IPG, who continue to grow their top line, maybe not at stellar rates, but certainly at respectable rates, and what you see at the other end of the spectrum with Publicis and WPP, who are showing declines. Now, obviously, to some extent, that's due to loss of business. In the case of WPP in September of last year, they had a bad run, particularly in 1 week. And that's had an impact. But having said that, it's going to take time to try and reverse the trend. Obviously, if you're going down, at some point in time it'll bottom out. The question is when. Whether they're doing enough structural change in the long term is yet to be seen. But essentially, Omnicom and IPG have not really restructured their businesses. They've focused on their brands. They've invested in their people. So in the short term, I think they look better. WPP and Publicis have done more structural change in the short term, and that's caused more disruption. I mean, if I look at the agencies like a Saatchi or a BBH, or indeed even a Leo Burnett, or if I look at Y&R or JWT, I mean, these agencies have lost their luster. So in the short term, you're going to have a problem. The other thing I think is interesting about IPG and indeed about Omnicom is they are based in the US. I mean, with all due respect to Cannes, the battle that you referred to is not going to be won and lost here. It's going to be won or lost in the United States. And coming back to what we were saying about President Trump and the growth of the US economy, the US has become disproportionately more important, not less important, since Trump assumed the presidency. So what happens in Boston, New York, Washington, Chicago, Detroit, WPP's largest client is Ford Motor Company, which is based in Detroit. What happens there is critically important. It's not going to be decided here on the beaches of Cannes. It's going to be decided, and that's where I think Omnicom and IPG really do have an advantage, because they are there 24/7. You know, working with the clients, working on the creative side, on the media side, and it's trying to pull that together that's really important. And WPP's weakness, and indeed Publicis' weakness, has been more in lack of penetration or maintaining market share in the US rather than anywhere else. In fact, outside the US, WPP and Publicis have done reasonably well, particularly WPP.
If we just focus on the two for a little bit longer, very different strategies. Publicis embarks upon its biggest acquisition in its history, buying a data company, and at the same time WPP is looking to
you've got the reverse.
It's
even deeper than that, because you have IPG buying Acxiom, and you have Merkle being acquired by Dentsu some years ago. So what you've seen, and then you look at the data acquisitions that Google itself is making, and that Salesforce, and paying up. Salesforce paid, 14 times, 15 times revenue a week or so ago for what is essentially a data asset.
So you're saying Publicis is right to acquire, that's the right strategy to buy a data company?
Listen, I don't know enough about Epsilon and Acxiom. I think Merkle was a first-class acquisition. That was a very high price, 1.7 billion, and nobody knew that David Williams wanted to sell the whole company because he was marketing 40%. But that was about 1.7 billion, which seemed to be a high price at the time. But it really did position Dentsu. They're the best positioned of the top six, I think. They're very media-driven, they're very digital-driven, they're very data-driven. I would say the second best would be probably Acxiom. IPG, I'm told, rented the data from Acxiom, so buying the company maybe made a little bit more sense. Epsilon looks to me like much more of a tired asset and more questionable, so that's my perspective. Kantar, look, there are good parts.
This is a business you know well, right?
Yeah, but there are good parts to Kantar. Kantar World Panel, the online panel is very good. Kantar Media is a very good business. So I think there are parts of it, but the problem, I think, as the private equity firms that you talk to about it would admit, it's like the curate's egg. It's good in parts. And there isn't a consistency there, particularly on the custom side of the business. I mean, I would be, as a shareholder in WPP, I'm biased. I'd very much like to see Vista Partners acquire the company, because I think they would create the radical change that's needed. I'm not so sure from what I hear that necessarily is going to be the case. There's platinum there as well, so according to press reports. Again, I've heard a little bit of declining interest there, but Apollo and Bain seem to be there. But for them, it's a difficult decision because, as I said, there are good parts and there are tough parts. So there's going to have to be radical restructuring. And I think the people at Kantar think, being out from the yoke, the WPP yoke, is something they're looking forward to. Be careful what you wish for. I think life with a Vista Partners or an Apollo or a Bain, I'm not so sure about platinum, but with those companies, it's going to be tougher.
Let's refocus the lens on you and S4. What are your priorities this year?
Well, it's really broadening and deepening our client relationships organically.
Not through acquisitions, which you've
been
famous for.
And adding deals. I think we'll see what happens in the next 24, 48, 72 hours. But we'll see.
So watch this space.
But there are things that we want to do on the acquisition side. But broadly, we have two pillars. Our business is purely digital. We're focused on the 200 billion. It is growing at about 20% as opposed to the 300 billion in media that's not growing or actually declining. Free to air under pressure. Obviously newspapers and magazines continue to be under pressure. So purely digital, focused on that holy trinity of first party data, driving content creation and programmatic. Our mantra is faster, better, cheaper, which sounds glib and superficial, but really resonates with clients in a way that I haven't seen before. The degree of experimentation by clients is quite extraordinary in trying to find these models in-house, both creative and media, a mixed model or even out-house. And lastly, a unitary model, no more earn-outs. Half shares, half cash is where we're going. So deals will be a part of our growth, but what the primary focus is going to be on broadening and deepening our relationships. We have a client list to die for, and which others would give their right arm for. But having said that, we've got to broaden and deepen it because the good news is we have a clean sheet of paper. The bad news is we have a clean sheet of paper. So we have to build scale.
It does feel as though data is the only game in town. Does that mean where you bulk up on
That's
data
the
and technology?
That's the battleground. That is the key issue. I mean, it gets lost a little bit in the concern about brand safety and privacy and electoral interference. But essentially what's going on is our clients thought when the web came along that the dominance of Walmart and Tesco and Carrefour would be broken. What's happened is that the e-tailers, Amazon, Alibaba, Tencent, plus Facebook and Google have come along and they control the data. Now, whether they're using those privacy issues and those political risk issues and brand safety issues as a fig leaf or not, it doesn't really matter. What they've said is they're going to control that data more effectively to protect the consumer. And that's put pressure on our clients. And our clients, having reduced their marketing inputs, their marketing staff, and now beefing it up, they want to take back control. Just like Brexit and the Brexit voters, they want to take back control. And what they really want is to exert more control over the direct-to-consumer relationship and use that first-party data, which they own, to build a relationship with you and me as consumers. That's the real battleground. And I was talking to a group in Munich today about first-party data. It was a group of people who actually do have a lot of first-party data. That is an asset which is priceless. And that's the third limb of our business.
So that's an asset you buy, is that what you're saying?
Well, there are very few and far between. At the moment, we're relying on our clients, a client like Netflix or a client like Google or Facebook or whoever it happens to be, to provide us with the data. But when Unilever buys Dollar Shave Club, when Coca-Cola buys Costa, when Nestle acquire the retail rights to Starbucks for $7 billion, what they're really doing is establishing a direct-to-consumer relationship, and that really is the key. That really is the key, and that's where I think the key battleground is with the platforms. The platforms, because they're having to respond to all the concerns that get well publicized on CNBC and beyond, I think are becoming much more sensitive and sensitized to this issue, and they're making strenuous efforts. Facebook, 30,000 people they've hired to monitor content. Google, 10,000 they've hired. And there are demands for them to do more, probably rightly. I mean, I've always argued they are media companies. They've never fessed up to that, But you know, the chickens are coming home to roost on that, and I think they are starting to deepen their understanding of the implications and their responsibilities for the content that are on their platform.
Just finally on that point, there may be antitrust cases coming. It's been flagged up by the DOJ
we
and the FTC.
We have 3 in Europe. Vestager has opined on 2.
But in the United States, there may be cases coming now, and they've suggested that could be the case. Do you think it's right? I mean, you've long called them out for the amount of dominance they've had in digital advertising. Do you think it's right that the regulators pull back over them?
I noticed, Karen, a significant change in their attitude. I mentioned the number of people they've hired. I think they are more sensitive and sensitized to it. I don't think they've gone as far as to say we are media companies, but they understand the implications. And I think there is, to some extent, a degree of frustration amongst them because they have made strenuous efforts and then they get called out for things they think are relatively minor. The one thing I think that they don't do that they should do is they should focus on, I mean, Sheryl Sandberg at DLD in Munich and at Davos said that 90 million small businesses and medium-sized businesses use Facebook for advertising. They should position themselves, and Google does it as well. I would say something like 60 to 70% of Google's 125 billion of advertising revenues out of the 200 billion, and out of the 52 at Facebook, 60 to 70% is generated by small and medium-sized companies. Those are the engines of growth in the economy on jobs, which is the key issue. You know, does technology destroy or create jobs? I tend to be in the camp that says it destroys it a bit. So focusing on this small business issue, I think arguing that because you've got 20% share you shouldn't be regulated is the wrong argument. I think they should be totally focused on demonstrating that they are good for small and medium-sized business. Just like Jack Ma, when you hear him talk about Alibaba, he says that is the platform of growth for Chinese companies, small Chinese companies in China and beyond internationally. So I think that's where they should shift the attention, because we're all going to be concerned in the middle class, that hollowing out of the middle class, the lack of improvement in real wages. That's again, you know, rather like data, that's another battleground which I think Google and Facebook and Amazon can win. I mean, Amazon is going to make its gains in share on advertising and search in small and medium-sized companies. It's not going to be the short tail. It's going to be the long tail. That's the key.
Thank you very much for your time. That's fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm James Wright and thanks for watching Marketing Media Money. You can check out more of our videos by clicking on the boxes on the screen, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more from CNBC International. Thanks for watching.